Hi guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian, and today we are taking a look at a pair of extremely rare Schonberger-Laumann automatic pistols. Now, Laumann is generally considered one of the prime contenders for the award of first automatic pistol actually produced. And he didn't quite get it. He was just beaten out by the Salvator-Dormus pistol. But his gun is still a very interesting one to take a look at. Now, Lawmen was one of the manufacturers who had been making manually repeating pistols, like this ring trigger, I believe that's an 1888 model, manual repeater. And what he did was take this idea and realized that he could adapt this into a self-loading pistol. Now, he patented this idea on November 25th, 1891, and proceeded to make what became known as the 1892 model Lawmen automatic pistol, which looked very much like this, but had one of these levers on the side, and it was semi-automatic. Now, the way these guns work, these ring trigger manual repeaters, is basically that the ring connects to a lever, which connects to a lug on the bolt, and when you move the ring back and forth, it cycles the bolt forward and backward. We can see that there's the trigger of this is actually back here, so once you close the lever, then the trigger appears through the ring and you can fire the gun. The way these were converted into semi-autos was basically to put a spring on the bolt and get rid of the lever down here. You make it a lever on the side like this so that it can be manually cocked if necessary, but the spring on the bolt, the bolt goes through the same travel that it would have on a ring trigger gun, except it's now being controlled by a spring instead of your finger. So this was what allowed Lawman to easily create a self-loading pistol. It was also kind of the reason for his failure as an automatic pistol designer, because these 1894 guns are the last things that Lawman was responsible for. The problem was there were too many holdovers, too much obsolete technology because he was working from this manual design, where Dormus, who still didn't have a pistol that got accepted, but the Salvator-Dormus was built from the ground up as a semi-auto pistol, and that's much more conducive to further development and refinement of that system. Now, the intermediate gun here, the 1892 Lawman automatic pistol, unfortunately, I don't have an example of. I believe there are two of them known to exist today, and I think they're both in Germany or Austria. So I have some pictures of it that you can see, but we'll kind of skip over that and take a closer look at these two. These are Schonberger-Laumann pistols. Now, the Schoenbergers were actually brothers in Austria, and they acted sort of as agents for Lawman. He hooked up with them. He was probably working with them back in his manual pistol days, but when he started to have trouble with his 1892 gun, well, at first it was the Schoenbergers who arranged to get his 1892 gun tested by the Austro-Hungarian military. It didn't pass, but they spent 3 years testing it. It was tested from 1892 into about 1895. He didn't have to wait for the very end of that trial to realize that there were improvements to be made, and he ended up partnering, selling some of his patent rights to the Schoenbergers, and together they created the Schonberger-Laumann, which is this pistol. It's a somewhat refined version. Honestly, not entirely sure what the mechanical differences are, but we're getting better, presumably, here. For one thing, the bolt doesn't come out the back of it. That helps. And the Schonberger-Laumann was also manufactured in small numbers. This whole series, these two and the Lawman-only automatic pistols, definitely significantly less than 100 were manufactured. There may be a dozen existing today, and about six that are actually documented and known of. There are probably about that many more in various collections undocumented. However, these guys were tested by the Austro-Hungarian military from 1894 for a year or two. They were also actually tested by the Siamese government. We say Thailand today, but at the time it was Siam. Kind of interesting. They got apparently 7 of them for testing. And this system, still too much holdover from the old manual repeater days, and it wasn't accepted. I believe Lawman actually kind of took this rather poorly and ended up killing himself when his guns were all rejected, which is unfortunate. Oops, I guess. One would hope he'd have a bit thicker skin and soldier on trying new designs. Certainly, in the history of firearms design, it is quite rare to find any gun or any inventor who manages to find commercial success on their first try. Usually it's more like their 10th or 12th try before someone really gets a gun that takes off and is successful. So this isn't designing especially successful military and commercial firearms is not an easy task. Anyway, why don't we go ahead and take a closer look at these, and I can show you some of the details and the controls and how they work. So we really kind of have to start with this manual gun because it's just such a funky, cool looking piece. This does feed from a Mannlicher style clip, 5 rounds en bloc there, and when you chamber the last round, the clip falls out the bottom, and then this lever cycles the bolt. Now this has this very interesting system where when you fire the gun, you see the striker drops, and then when you release the trigger, it just snaps open under spring pressure. The trigger, of course, is this, so you can't use the trigger until the bolt's all the way forward. So that would, having that spring in there would certainly be a nice step forward, nice step towards a self-loading gun. Now, we'll take a look at the controls back here because they will be similar on the semi-autos. So this is the safety lever. It is currently disengaged, allows me to dry fire. However, if I flip this up, I have now pretty much locked everything on the gun. So at this point, the ring can't move, the trigger is locked, nothing can happen here. If I disengage the safety, we can then close it with the action cocked. If I lock it now, again, the ring is locked in position, the trigger still does nothing. So this locks the striker, whether it's fired or ready to fire. Pretty effective safety there, really. And assuming you're right-handed, you can just flip that out of the way, and the gun's ready to fire. This one, by the way, is serial number 15. Not a whole lot of these were made, obviously. Your rear sight is just a groove cut in the top strap of the frame. And then this big contoured button on the side is a clip release. So if you want to unload the gun before the clip is empty, you open it up, push that button in, you can see the latch sliding down inside there. That allows this follower spring, which by the way has a spring down here that's pushing on it, that allows the follower to eject the clip and the remaining cartridges out the top. Now moving on to this guy. This is an 1894 first model of semi-auto rifle. So we've skipped the 1892 because we don't have one here to take a look at. But the 1894, you can still see a couple of very clear similarities, like this contoured clip release button, which stayed like exactly the same. One wonders if they managed to reuse part of the machining or the forging tooling to do that. We also have a safety mechanism that looks like it's copied pretty much exactly from the original manual guns. So safety is engaged here, trigger is disconnected, the bolt is disconnected, or the bolt is locked, can't go anywhere, and then when the safety is disengaged, now it can cycle. These Schonberger-Laumans are quite large guns. I think you can see that just from my hand. They're fairly heavy, they're very long. They also feed from a 5-round en bloc clip. Now if I open this and then engage the safety, I can lock the bolt open. So now we can take a look at the inside. There's our bolt face. We've got an ejector down there, firing pin inside, chamber. These are both chambered for the 8mm Schoenberger cartridge. I have no idea what the velocity was, haven't been able to find that, but this is a simple blowback action. It fired a 115 grain bullet, and I would expect the velocity to be probably around 800 feet per second, maybe 600, something like that. It's a relatively unpowerful cartridge because it is a simple blowback gun. Now the patent rights for these did end up with Steyr, and these guns were manufactured at Steyr, and they have that nice marking here on the side. This is serial number 6 of the first pattern. So again, the way you can tell the first pattern, it actually has 2 screws up here, and it has this fancy contoured 3D clip release button. In contrast to that, we have a second pattern, still an 1894 model, but a second variant that's a little bit different. Really only 2 distinctive differences. One is that this fanciness is gone, and now we just have a plain button in a hole in the frame for the clip release. The other is that we now have one screw here in this follower spring housing instead of two. Beyond that, this functions exactly the same way. This particular one does have an automatic hold open, so when the gun is empty, it will lock open automatically for you, so you can then load a clip, and then to release the bolt, you just push the safety back down. You can then also manually lift the safety, which locks the bolt, locks the trigger, and renders the gun totally safe. Now, nice for them to include the automatic hold open. That definitely simplifies things for loading the gun. Button here is still our clip release inside there. Dovetailed front sight, so you can adjust it for windage. And then our rear sight is milled into the frame right there. Not terrible sights, not fantastic, but hey, at least they are windage adjustable, so you can get it shooting where you need it. We still have that Waffenfabrik Steyr marking, and this is serial number 10. The first and second variant guns were done in separate serial number ranges, I believe. All right, so there you go, guys. Two very, very early Austrian automatic pistols. In fact, two of the very first automatic pistols ever made. By 1894, there were other designs. One of the interesting things to think about with these to take in context is no matter when the gun was developed, even if it was one of the very first guns, like these Schonberger-Laumans and Laumens really were, even if they didn't immediately take off, it wasn't like they were dropped right away. These guns all went through a period of development and experimentation. So these may have started in 1891 with the patents, 1892 with the first guns, and being tested into the mid-1860s. Same thing would happen with the Dormus pistol, same thing would happen also with the guns that were successful. Consider the Borchardt, which is initially manufactured in 1893. It doesn't sell well. DWM brings in Georg Luger and turns it into the Luger automatic pistol in 1898. It's this series of development, and we see that and recognize it in the guns that were successful, but it's important to realize that the same development path really was also happening in the guns that ultimately turned out to be unsuccessful. Thank you for watching, guys. I am privileged to have been able to take a look at all three of these guns. They're all of them extremely rare, but certainly the automatics in particular. Hopefully you also enjoyed having a chance to take a look at these, and hopefully you learned something about them. If you do enjoy this sort of material, please do consider checking out my Patreon page. It is support from the fine folks there that really makes it possible for me to travel and find these guns and bring them to you. Thanks for watching.